So it's completely suicidal to try and stand here and make some academic points to you now after that presentation, and with a sort of tsunami of lunch waiting to be delivered to 300 people. What am I doing? I must be mad. Anyway, so it obviously is a great pleasure to be here, and this is a heartfelt point coming from Birmingham in such a magnificent conference and in such a beautiful setting. That's no disrespect to Birmingham or to the one Aussie that we saw who went there in 1986 or whenever it was. Now then. I think I must try and keep this brief in light of the context. So I'll try and make some general points about leadership in regional and local development. Then talk a little bit about a case study. And then finally draw out some conclusions and sort of stand back. So the general points to begin with. Well, I think there are some new things to be said about the leadership of place. And by place, we mean regions, localities, identifiable territories that have perhaps been neglected when policy is run from a national level. We need to recognize the difference between leading in organizations and leading in places. I mean, this is a crucial point, really. Organizations are perhaps hierarchical and there's a control function that you can exercise, whereas leading in a place, you're really dealing with networks and with the consequences of a distributed power structure. Secondly, I think we need to deal with certain challenges that confront places at the moment, and one of those in particular derives from the globalization process, and another, I think, derives from the introduction of the knowledge-based economy. I mean, we could talk about climate change, but let's just stick with those two. And I think it's important that we, as policymakers and leaders in regions, try and understand the impact and implications of globalization and the digital economy on our localities. Okay. So first of all, globalization. Well, it's been argued that there's going to be a death of geography because of the internet, but this is clearly not the case. And actually, a new geography is emerging with the globalized economy, which is based on new kinds of what geographers rather unglamorously call agglomeration, new kinds of connections between people in proximity with one another, and the ability also, I think, to have long-range connections as well as short-range connections. So this is crucial, I think, in understanding the new geography of the globalized economy, and in this context, it's not that place becomes less important, it becomes in many ways more important because places are now dealing with the flows of resources around the world, of knowledge around the world, and they have to stake their claim in that and try to build on that basis. The second challenge to highlight really for place-based leadership is that it requires an approach that can cross between the issues that arise in different silos. These are sometimes referred to as wicked issues. The issues that come up in different services have to be related to each other. So we need to find ways of working across these silos and of being more integrated in our thinking. For example, in dealing with a range of different power players where no one organization is in charge. It's this experience of trying to lead in a context where no one individual is in charge, but there are many powerful players, that we need to embrace and learn about. But too much training around leadership focuses on the internal organizational leadership that I've referred to, and much of the messages there is about command and control. That's not appropriate where you're dealing with a network of people who can't be commanded or controlled. We also need to address the fact that knowledge can be drawn from many different sources, and these days it's more likely to be built up by pulling it from sources on the internet in a sort of combinatorial way rather than accumulated over time, building one step on another. So knowledge these days is much more about mixing and hybridizing, mashing things together, than it is about the long slog of accumulative learning. The leadership involves working at different levels in the multi-level governance system, I think. I mean, that's particularly true in the European Union, but it must also be true in a federal system like the one we have here. And so I can draw a stark distinction between the traditional leadership within a bureaucracy and what you might call the new leadership thinking around networks, pulling networks together from different disciplines and different agencies and perhaps different levels of governance. That point more or less the same thing. I think the idea is that there may be some interchange between leadership within organizations and leadership between organizations, but that's not to underestimate the differences involved in working in an interagency setting. I mean, one of the efforts we've been trying to make in Birmingham is to build a research agenda around this topic, and a series of seminars that we're organizing to try and learn from people's experience of leading in these decentralized contexts. Some of them are listed there. And if I can get the zapper to work. Okay. The RSA, the Regional Studies Association, is producing a book on this topic at the moment, and I think some more publications will flow in future. Okay, just a quick point on the regional innovation process. There's a kind of uncertainty that leaders have to deal with, apart from the uncertainty of the zapper, that there's a kind of uncertainty that comes from the new geography, which is hard to understand, the geography of globalization I mentioned, where place does matter, but in a kind of new way. But there's also an uncertainty which we need to face up to, I think, about research and innovation, an uncertainty over time. And it really simply isn't always possible to predict the implications of research that's done now, the implications for the future. I heard one of the Nobel Prize winners from last year talking about why they got the prize, which was for inventing the use of fiber optic cable for broadband about 25 years ago, before there was an internet. And they were asked, you know, how come they were such a genius? And they said, well, actually, it was the following 25 years which made this invention of ours genius.